Good morning on this Sunday, April 9th. A happy Easter and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Former President Donald Trump charged with 34 felonies in New York. What's next in the Georgia investigation? Also, Governor Brian Kemp vetoes his first bill after this year's legislative session. And the man behind the Buckhead City movement says he's moving out of Buckhead. Melita, Phil, and Martha are all here. Alicia Thomas-Cersei is back filling in for Theron. Welcome back.
Thank you.
The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
First of its kind arraignment in New York City as former President Donald Trump is arraigned on 34 charges. The former president pleaded not guilty to the charges stemming from hush money paid during the 2016 presidential campaign. He's not due back in court until December. Now, Martha, to you first. A lot of pundits and analysts are saying that, this New York City case is pretty weak compared to what could come out of Fulton County. Do you agree?
Yeah, a lot of lawyers are saying that too, not just pundits and analysts. And I have a friend who knows the lawyer that's representing Trump here in Georgia, and they are in kind of agreement that it seemed like the same thing that was just being repeated over and over again, that it wasn't really 34 counts. Of course, you might see the meat behind it as they reveal more, but that at first blush, it was kind of disappointing, and you could tell by the way the pundits reacted that they were disappointed too, even on the left or the right. But for me personally, this is a very sad day because I think we've crossed a line that's going to be really difficult to come back from. And I don't say we can never come back, but if I were Joe Biden, I would be concerned. If I were Hunter Biden, I would be concerned. Representative Comer has said he's got Republican DAs already looking at how can we do this, and I just don't want this tit for tat. I know it'll never happen, but Joe Biden ought to pardon Donald Trump, because then that would put an end to this.
Melita.
Well, I think it's interesting that there are so many counts, in part because Donald Trump nickeled and dimed his lawyer by making so many different payments as part of this hush money. He could have written one check and had one indictment. But I think what we have in the Fulton County case is the Republican delay tactics by Trump's attorneys. The prosecutors now have until May to answer that motion to quash they filed. So we won't see any action in Fulton County until the prosecutors have answered that original motion to quash and a judge has ruled on it. So the focus will remain New York until we can focus on a Fulton County hearing about that motion to quash.
Well, Phil, let's focus on the political angle here, because after the arraignment, the former president flew back to Mar-a-Lago and gave basically a campaign speech in front of a lot of his supporters, many of them Georgians. We saw Bruce Lavelle in the audience, also Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Just your thoughts on how this plays out politically. There are a lot of Republicans who hate Donald Trump, but are like, you know what, this is wrong with what's being done to him.
Well, I'm going to point out to that we did an Insider Advantage poll, and his polling continues to go up. And why did he give that speech at Mar-a-Lago after the so-called indictment, which is terrible and should never have happened? He's defending himself like anybody else would. He's innocent until proven guilty, and a lot of the left doesn't realize that or care about that. And the Republicans aren't delaying anything in Fulton County. It's the judge that's setting the calendar. I don't know. I'm ready to go. I think the Trump lawyers are ready to go here in Fulton County. It's a flawed process. We've talked about it on the show before. Democrat attorneys, I would just quote some of the most prominent Democrat attorneys in the country saying this is a very weak case in Fulton County. It's been flawed. You saw the special grand jury. It was all screwed up with this foreman babbling about stuff that she never should have. Fani Willis is very partisan. You remember she already got spanked by the judge, William McBurney, for going after targeting Burt Jones, now the lieutenant governor, actually holding a fundraiser. She's a Democrat, a partisan Democrat, and so Burt Jones was taken away as a target. I think that all of the people that she wants to target, who are Republicans, of course, they're being unfairly targeted by this partisan witch hunt.
Alicia, there's a lot to digest here. Anxious to hear your thoughts on this.
You know what my problem is? Anytime you're talking about a former president, hush money, a porn star, indictment, all in one sentence, we've got a bigger problem. And this is the same person who said, I could go on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I would not lose voters. And so the fact that this is still the person who is leading on the Republican side as their presidential candidate is really troubling. And I think Republicans have a real problem, and that's what you need to be focused on.
So ironically, Stormy Daniels sat down and did an interview this week, and I watched most of it, and it was kind of interesting what she pointed out, and I was surprised that I agreed with it. That she said if the kinds of things that happened in the past, like with Bill Clinton, John Kennedy, John Edwards, and others, had happened today, they might have been handled differently, and I think that's true. I think that in years past, behavior like Donald Trump's was just dismissed and nothing happened with it. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I do think that it's an interesting time, and I just think that this New York case is very, very weak, and I don't think it's where it's going to go.
Well, Stormy Daniels actually said that none of this ever happened under oath. That's one thing, and
Did she cash the check?
But I think to your point, that this is just nothing. It's a state charge that he's trying to make into a federal case, and the FEC commissioner just said on Friday that there's no campaign finance violation. That's just BS.
Melita, final word on this. Let's move on.
Well, it's interesting that both Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump called for protests in New York, but there were more press to cover the protests than there were protesters.
So what? What's that prove? You're in New York, left-wing New York.
Let's take it back here at home, where Vice President Kamala Harris traveled to Dalton Thursday to tour a solar panel manufacturing plant and talk about the administration's focus on clean energy. Melita, your thoughts on her message while she was here?
Well, it is very interesting, as she pointed out, that in a Republican-led district, they are benefiting from this solar energy initiative funded by the Biden administration. And these are forward-thinking jobs, forward-thinking manufacturing opportunities, and it's the wave of the future, and it's great that Georgia's the center of it.
Well, Martha, I would say that Governor Kemp would say we are a red state and we are the center of EVs.
Well, and this idea that Republican states don't want to do alternative energy and they don't want to do all of these new industries is just ridiculous. And also, we've got the jobs were actually brought here by the Kemp administration. Yes, some money came from the Biden numbers, but the initial investment was because the Kemp administration brought them here. So they worked together, Democrats and Republicans, to bring these jobs here. Yes. And she didn't really step on herself, which I think is a win for Kamala Harris right now.
It's amazing.
Alicia, does it matter? I mean, red, blue, who cares? Jobs are jobs, and clean energy is clean energy.
That's exactly how I feel. We're proud of the work that we're doing, right? When we talk about electric vehicles, solar energy. This is an administration, I think, that has helped to really bolster this industry. And so you're talking about the largest purchase in U.S. history of solar panels. This is tremendous. So I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, Georgians will have more jobs. We're contributing to our climate, right? And so this is a good thing, and it's a nice bipartisan effort.
One real quick point, though, we still don't quite know what to do with these solar panels when they run their life and how to dispose of them safely, and that's the same problem we have with electric vehicles. I'm not dissing it. I'm just saying this is a problem we're going to have to solve before we get there.
Phil.
Well, it does seem we have to care about if we're a Democrat or Republican, because all too many Democrats want to rush into this alternative energy and want to destroy the fossil fuel industry right away. No, we need a transition. The Biden administration is not doing a proper transition. Yes, Martha's right. I think we all would hopefully agree that we need a varied portfolio, but don't destroy gas and oil in this rush to get solar or whatever.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there, because up next, right out of the gate, the governor is not shy about using his veto pen on a bill that would cap public college tuition hikes. Stay tuned.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp on Tuesday vetoed a bill that would have capped tuition increases at public universities and colleges, calling it an infringement on the authority of the State Board of Regents and a violation of the state constitution. Senators amended the bill on the final day of the legislative session to say that none of the university system of Georgia's 26 universities and colleges could raise tuition or fees by more than 3% from the previous year without approval from both houses of the General Assembly. Phil, the governor clearly said this was an overreach.
I actually agree with the governor, and I actually read what the the Constitution said, and he is correct that is the purview of the Board of Regents. And I'm opposed to any tuition increases. I think most parents and students are. However, as you're pointing out, when you set this up, the legislature overwhelmingly wants to have that power for itself. So it's conceivable in January they could override the governor.
I mean, Alicia, this was an attempt to get at some increases in tuition. Is there another avenue that they could go here?
This is a real issue. I remember being in the legislature 2008-9 when we had to cut the University of Georgia system, University System of Georgia, and it was painful, right? All of our departments had to receive those cuts, but we also saw in turn tuition skyrocket, and the legislature could do nothing. And so I think it's telling that this bill passed almost unanimously, right, across the House and the Senate. And so I'm hoping that the regents get this message, that those legislators who are representing constituents who are paying this tuition and fees, that they are careful about raising that. And so I agree that there's a separation of powers here. That's important. So I understand why the governor vetoed the bill, but they are going to have to listen. And I think if the Board of Regents does not, then the legislature will probably find another way to cap some of those increases.
That's a good point. In the meantime, Chancellor Sonny Perdue clearly not happy about the $66 million in budget cuts to the university system. Martha, he called them disappointing considering the state's strong economy. And you know, he was in the hot seat in 2008 when they had to make those extreme budget cuts when times were not so good.
Well, on the last point, I just wanted to say that I think for the last 3 years they haven't raised the tuition at all, even in high inflation times. So it works both ways. But on this issue, I think what the legislature's trying to do is to push the University System of Georgia to use their reserves. Their reserves are something like $500 million. And I think that unlike several other areas, you know, Sonny Perdue likes to talk about pots of money back when he was governor. I think that the legislature was trying to push them into using one of their pots of money.
But Melita, we think about the university system. I mean, of course, Georgia comes to mind, Georgia State, but what about the smaller schools that don't have these huge reserves?
Well, it's interesting that you bring it up because the larger schools have increasing enrollment. It is the smaller schools, many of them that have double-digit declining enrollment. And what you see here is former Governor Perdue is wearing a very different set of shoes, so to speak, when he's the chancellor. And it is an indication, I believe you're correct, that they're trying to push the university system, Martha, as you said, to use their reserves because there is a great deal of reserves. But the enrollment is declining because the population group which goes to college is declining, and this is going to be a problem that you can't just recruit adults into college to overcome.
Good point. Well, Democrats have their eye on one of their own, State Representative Misha Maynor from Atlanta, who was the lone Democrat who voted in favor of the school voucher bill. Well, now some, including Democratic State Senator Josh McLaurin, are calling for her to get primaried. He'll even put up money to the Democratic candidate willing to do so. Leisha, are you not allowed to disagree with your own party?
Apparently not, Lori. And I think people know I've experienced this myself, serving in the legislature for 12 years. And I have to say, this is personal for me, and it's also a larger issue. And it's about Misha Maynor, it's about school choice, but for me, it's about two other things. Here are white legislators who live in suburban Atlanta, whose children have probably never seen the inside of a public school, telling a legislator who has some of the lowest performing schools in her district what her constituents should be doing with their own children. And so I'm troubled by the level of hypocrisy here and the fact that legislators get to have a double standard about who gets to vote their district and who doesn't. That's my second issue. I can think of white male legislators in particular, or members of Congress who voted against Obamacare, who voted for the Confederate flag, but they're given a pass because they've got to vote their district. Well, I want Misha Maynor and any other Democrat, and any Republican for that matter, to vote their district. And I will say to you that when it happened to me, and it did for many years, I didn't see a lot of people standing standing up for me. So let this be the moment where I stand up for Misha Maynor and other legislators who simply want to vote their district and their conscience.
That's a great perspective, and I want to take it over to Melita, the other Democrat on the panel, because Representative Maynor responded saying, quote, "When a black independent female Democrat legislator who grew up in poverty wants to give the bottom 25% of children attending failing schools a second chance at education, this infuriates some of my fellow Democrats to the point that they are soliciting my opposition, and that's exactly the problem." Does she have a point?
She may have a point on that particular issue, but the issue with Misha Maynor is far greater than that one vote. She's not active in her caucus. She's very, very independent from her caucus. She is used as a tool by the Republicans to create division in the caucus by siding with them. And so it's one thing for a legislator to take a vote that's not in line with the caucus on a specific issue. It's quite different when they are consistently a source of irritation and division within their caucus, and she falls into that category.
Martha, and then to Phil. But Martha, Republicans do this too.
No, I think it's wrong either way. I mean, Republicans do this too, no doubt about it. But in the case of Misha Maynor, I'm going to give her a donation. She can call me and I will give her some money because she is representing her district, and the caucus system is half of what's wrong. Democrats and Republicans with our political system today. This fact, if you don't toe the line, we're going to run somebody against you, or we're not going to raise money for you. And that is a problem because she is representing her district more, because what happens is, the reason I don't understand why the Democratic Party does not support school choice, because their constituents do. Okay, I've been out in the area. Poor folks do, middle class folks do. Now, the teachers unions do not, and the organizations that lobby hard do not, and they have a lot of money that comes with them. But if you talk to rank and file parents, you find a lot of support there.
Phil.
Well, I think, Martha, you touched on this slightly. I'll tell you why most Democrats, not all, most are against parental choice for schools. Is you talk about tools, they're tools of the left-wing teachers union, like the Georgia Association of Educators, which is an affiliate of the National Education Association. This happens all too often, so I admire her for being an independent. She's still a Democrat, a tool of the Republicans. That's absurd.
Yeah.
And
that's an insult.
It is, and I'm surprised, Melita, you would say that. And I think we should celebrate in either party someone who thinks they're doing the right thing. I mean, both parties ought to be more. If the Democrat Party ought to be more to the center, that would be good. And the Republican Party is a center-right party. And so I think that sometimes, yes, there are leadership votes. We get that in legislative bodies, and that is important. But there ought to be free votes, like in the British House of Commons. Each party says, just vote your conscience.
Alicia, you want the final word on this, since it hits close to home, you say?
It does, and I don't know Misha Maynor well. For me, this is not about Misha. This is a bigger issue. We can't say things like one person is being a tool of another party because she has independent thought. I don't know if I would show up to a room where I'm being ostracized and people are rolling their eyes and talking about me on television. I think I would probably find something better to do with my time too. And so let's tamper down on this kind of rhetoric and let's celebrate people who are thinking independently. I also have to say this: I am a strong, unapologetic supporter of public education, and I don't want people to think because you support choice that you somehow don't support public education. I'm blessed to live in a great neighborhood with a great public school. Not everybody has that option, and I want children in Misha Maynor's district and the district that I used to represent to have the same options as everybody sitting up here on this panel.
All right, we'll leave it there. Up next, the man behind the move for a Buckhead city is moving out of Buckhead. We'll discuss.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
The AJC reports Bill White is moving out of Buckhead after his movement for that area to break away from the city of Atlanta failed yet again at the legislature. Bill White says as long as Governor Kemp is in office, there's little hope of a similar bill ever passing. Phil.
Well, he came, he saw, and he lost. And I think that Governor Brian Kemp had a lot to do with that, too, because he did say, and rightly so, that as long as Governor Kemp is governor, the Buckhead cityhood movement is not going to go anywhere. I am in favor of people having the right to vote on cityhood, but that's the end of the show.
Alicia, with Mayor Andre Dickens in office and putting a renewed focus on Buckhead, was it difficult for White to really make a case here?
Absolutely. You know what I love about this? My favorite thing in politics is when you have this bipartisan smackdown. And that's what this was. You've got the governor, the mayor of Atlanta saying, we know what's best for the city of Atlanta. Your secession is not the plan. And so this nice man from New York came, burned a lot of bridges, threw a lot of bombs, and now he's leaving. And so I say, bye, Bill.
All right. Melita, on to an issue that you've been following. A bill aimed at protecting the Okefenokee Swamp from mining failed to pass this session. This one had major bipartisan support, but not only did it fail to pass, a measure to create a study committee about the issue failed as well. Why? What happened?
Well, it got caught up in this last-minute scramble, but I think the fact that we've had more than 100,000 comments about the mining issue sent to the Department of Natural Resources, almost an unprecedented number of public comments, almost all opposed to the mining, shows how well organized opponents to this environmental desecration are and how much interest there is. And I'm sure that the two bills you talked about will return next year, and I certainly hope the Department of Natural Resources does the right thing by listening to the citizens who want to protect the swamp.
Phil, I know you have a different perspective on this.
Yes, let's be clear for listeners, this mining project is not in the swamp. It's miles away. And also it does, I know you don't like this, but these are critical minerals to our national defense. Titanium, zirconium, we rely on too much foreign countries as it is. There's very few places in America where we can mine this. And so I think it's very necessary. And the EPD, they're following all the rules that George has set out.
I want to move on because this is a really important story. The AJC had an in-depth investigation this week on Georgia's Department of Community Health, alleging the state agency has failed to hold the managed care company Amerigroup accountable when they failed to provide services for state's foster kids. Now, this has far-reaching implications, Martha, especially if these kids don't get access to mental health services, then where do they end up?
Well, they end up changing homes a lot, and the AJC did correctly link this to the kids going to more homes, and I think that was really the most important part of the article. Amerigroup isn't complying with their contract, which makes them, DHS is not DCH, I'm sorry, is not keeping services from these kids, but it's harder to get. And I think we need to make the point that mental health services are hard to get for anybody in Georgia, but this especially, this group of people is really important. And they're competing with the federal government. The federal government is actually, when they have to go out and buy these services on their own, the feds pay more than the state does. And so that creates a problem too, as far as a shortage of services.
Alicia, where's the oversight here?
Yeah, I put on my legislative hat here and I say DCH is responsible here. You are responsible for spending millions, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. You're responsible for this process to let these contracts to these 3 managed health companies, and you're not doing your job. You're not keeping good records. There's no oversight. This is troubling at best. When I think about the hundreds of thousands of kids who are not getting services they need, they're not only ending up in different homes, they're ending up in the criminal justice system, right? They're ending up on the streets. They're ending up in places where they're not going to be good citizens. And so this is a tragedy, and I think the legislature needs to get involved, the governor needs to get involved, and certainly DCH needs to be held accountable.
And I want to commend the AJC on that investigation.
Absolutely.
Very great journalism there. Coming up, stay tuned for Winners and Losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Martha, I'll start with you.
Well, I just wanted to call attention to this book. It's called Captured by Love. Lee Ellis is a longtime Georgian. He was a POW in Vietnam, and he tells these love stories of these POWs that came home, and it's a really great read. And it's the 50th anniversary of Tommy Aaron from Gainesville winning the Masters.
Nice.
So we want to say hats off to him.
Alicia.
My winner this week is Representative Patty Bentley and all of our friends in rural Georgia. She does an amazing job of making sure that those issues are covered in the state, and so shout out to you. My loser this week would be the Republicans in the Tennessee legislature who expelled 2 members of the House for standing up against gun violence. And of course, we know what happened in Tennessee. Unacceptable, unbelievable, and it just makes me ask the question, where are we and what year are we in?
All right, Phil.
Well, they deserved it. But anyhow, my winner is federal judge Elizabeth Branch, and what she did, she's from Atlanta. She refuses now to have any law clerks from Stanford University because of the disgraceful conduct of those Stanford law students that disrupted a speech by a federal judge. And also my loser is that longtime communist Angela Davis. She accepted an award from the Atlanta City Council in March, and this is pretty funny. Now she doesn't want it because she hates the police and doesn't like the fact that the Atlanta City Council is in favor of constructing a police facility. So who cares what Angela Davis thinks?
All right, Melita.
Well, I'd like to call out Carrie Teagarden, the author of that AJC investigative piece we just were speaking about. And then while traveling, I watched, it's been out for a couple of years, the documentary about Chuck Lavelle, the wonderful musician from Georgia who finds such great inspiration in the 1,000 acres of land he manages as forest land. And it reminded me of our shared humanities demand for untamed spaces, like the protection of the Okefenokee Swamp and like the protection of Pine Log, the 14,000 acre site which the governor is now in negotiations for possible state purchase. And let's just remember the trees as we look at the Masters on Sunday afternoon and the beauty of those azaleas.
Can't miss them, that's for sure. Thanks everybody. Happy Easter and make it a great week. Bye-bye.